This document, then, yes, okay. Well, this document that I'm going to present to you will have this document, which is called A Decade of Change for Change of Air, which was developed by the entire ECLAC team here. I'm just a spokesperson for this document. I just like to say that the central messages that you will find in this document, and which I can't really see because this Spanish, is it changing to English? I'm not sure. The English is changing, but it's the the Spanish is not changing. Oh yes, okay. So all right, here we have it. Here we have it. So, what are the messages, the central messages in that document? First and foremost, that you're seeing, as you said, Mr. President, that we see growing global disparities between developing and developing countries. This region has been the most affected, hard hit by in all developing countries and all developing regions. But we and recovery, which really concerns us. So we don't need only a grain of sand, but we need actually a roadmap because we want a recovery. But this recovery is following a model that has already shown its structural weaknesses. Many countries are, um, of course, they're looking towards good prices for the commodities and they're hoping for recovery through this. And we also believe that in this document, we have given you an assessment of what has happened, what is happening with the Agenda 2030. We have evaluated the 11 of the 17 SDGs, and many of these are 11 of these are really not insufficiently implemented, and almost a third of these are actually, frankly, suffering from setbacks. And this is what we'll discuss in this report. And for this reason, we need a decade of action. Our under Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed has talked about and called for this many times, and it is more important now ever than ever. Of course, we have economic gaps. Disparities. We have 1% has 50% of global wealth. Consider this. So in our region, as I said, our region has been most hard hit with some internal disparities of vaccinated. Now we have the gaps, as a climate gap. Of course, we have 8% of emissions, and despite this, we are the most hard hit, especially Central America and the Caribbean. Of course, we have the gaps in a crisis response, almost $15 trillion for recovery, and we do not have these capacities. Unequal access to vaccines. We have an observatory on vaccination, and these are figures from the 4th of March, the 13th of February. And I think the 4th of March figures will also come up. You see Chile and Cuba, 89% of vaccination. Costa Rica at high levels of vaccination with but the curve is going down, and we see in the Caribbean, for example, some countries in Central America are still not vaccinated, that have still not reached 20% of their vaccination. Let us not even talk about Haiti, less than 1%. So when we look, the world is asking for us that 70% of the population should be vaccinated so that we can overcome, at least reach what we call herd immunity, but we're not reaching there, and that is very important to state this. We are the hardest hit region, and we're saying this with the information that we have to hand, as the president has asked us, and all of you have asked us. Latin America felt the hardest. We see the comparison. We led 6.8%, and the very fleeting recovery that we had in 2021, which was important, which was 6.2, but in 2022 we're going back to 6.1. And employment, which is so important to come out of inequality. Well, we cannot have employment coming back, recovering at the same extent as GDP, and debt exacerbates the problem. We have to look at the problem as far as debt is concerned. Well, we're in a bad situation because in the region, and you can see that this region is the most indebted of the developing world. And Dad, of course, Rebecca will help us to compare all of this because it's as it happens, we are the region which is highest indebtedness level, and also we are the region, especially in the Caribbean, that is have very high costs for total debt servicing. Roberto, we talked about Jamaica yesterday. Jamaica has to pay 61.1% of its revenue, export revenue. It has to pay in debt servicing. So it's 40% left for everything else. So we are in a very serious situation in our region.
And inflation has us all worried because inflation, especially with food and energy, hurts households the most, the poorest households, that is. So we're facing a very serious inflation issue, and our central banks are raising the interest rates as a result to counteract that problem. And we hope that we can attain the goals of the central banks by 2022, but nothing is sure, and inflation is rising, and poverty. I mentioned poverty, extreme poverty, in my opening address. 32.1% of the world is poor, 86 million people. We assess this every year, how poverty evolves based on household income. It could have increased more if it weren't that the government took. It could have been worse, but emergency relief funds were put into place by the government, with cash transfers, and they attained 45 billion dollars, but 93 billion. So this the government acted quickly in a very short period of time. But we face more uncertainty, difficult inflation, and we're thinking about public expense, and it's a very high one. And Chile, for example, some countries, such as Chile, substitutes right now its emergency relief funds to deal with inflation. And I wanted to also say hello to our dear friend Marta Lucia Ramirez. We were speaking yesterday about Colombia and what it has done to move forward within this crisis. Gender inequalities. That's really something. I said that women were pretty much ousted from the labor market, but this is the problem. Here are the figures. We have a setback of 18 years with regards to women working in the labor market, because they had to be at home taking care of their children, of the elderly, and the fact that schools were closed. This is all very elusive. So, what are the how do we view these SDG indicators? The report is a sort of traffic light where we show that only 1/3 of the 111 targets are currently on course. So only 32% are advancing at a steady pace. At least we're not attaining 30%, but at least they're moving up. It's a horrible report card. So 22% of them, 22% represents setbacks. So, and we run a risk of further setbacks. So this report is very detailed with regards to each target. So it's important to look at this and measure. Remember, what you don't measure doesn't exist. We have to face this. And together with the UN systems, and we have our SDG gateway where we disseminate this so we can see how the region moves forward and combines official country figures, if we have them, and figures from other sources, and voluntary reports that you send us each year, because this region has presented their reports in a very continuous manner. and we assess what goals we attain with our current trends.
Yes, of course. The 17 and 4 still. So we have three silent crises in this region. And you mentioned this, President. We have the crisis of the loss of more than 1 year of school in so many children, and that is very serious. The increase in gender violence and the exacerbation of terrestrial and by marine diversity as well, and well as the problems for women, as I mentioned before. And I said the exacerbation of terrestrial and marine biodiversity as a result of illegal activities, and often combined with killings of environmental defenders and activists.
So we are risking a lost generation. We've lost 56 weeks out of our school year, and our school year is 40 weeks. We've had the greatest interruption of the school year, more in this region, Latin America, than any other area in the world. And we've also lost cognitive abilities that are so important, and and a burden of care tasks. So how are we going to open up bars and restaurants and not schools? I think it's too much. Well, both are important. I know that, but still, come on, schools. And the other is that we run the risk of school dropouts. Uh, 85 million children missed out, or 23 million children could not return. Sorry, 3.1 million run a risk of not return it. And
A third of women, one in every three women is a victim of physical violence, and the 33.3 women. So we still have 33 seats in parliament. Of course, we're very politically active as far as women are concerned, but we must work towards a society of care. And that is what we're trying to seek here, a society of care, not the care economy. That's something completely different. We want a society of care. And of course, we have to fight against violence and promote political participation by women. It's a society of care, because it is not fair that women should be the ones always looking after the children and old people. This is a commitment of the entire family and the entire society. We need, therefore, to work towards a society of care, which will which will take care of itself and take care of others. And what we have learned in the pandemic, we have also learned that we need to have a more equitable distribution of power so that women can have more time available to them, so that can increase productivity and well-being. Our region has greatest wealth in biodiversity. So we have it a flash, but in the document, it's just a little detail here, but in the document we can have information from FAO and other sources. So this region has the greatest number of marine ecoregions. Of course, no, they're very filled with plastics, unfortunately, but we have to free these regions from plastic. But we have the Mesoamerican reef system, which is the largest, second largest in the world, and a fourth of the world's mangroves. We also the region with the highest number of terrestrial ecoregions, 24% of the total, 23% of the world's forests, highest 20% of indigenous people are in these forests. The forests that are in the hands of indigenous peoples are the best conserved forests. So, what are the problems that we have? What are the goals that we'll not reach? We have changes in land use, overexploitation of species, climate change, invasive alien species, and pollution. And the loss of forests is very seriously so many million hectares lost. The annual 138 million hectares of forest lost. They have the annual rate of deforestation. We have had some recovery. Of course, FAO can say this better than I, but there is continued um, risk to the forest. So we need incentives. We need to have incentives in order to truly uh, act in favor of biodiversity. In the pandemic, it was very difficult for us. We saw the environmental sector was even more hard hit. Why? Because the political commitment to the environment was not really there. 11 countries decreased their environmental budget by 35%. Of course, it was not very high, but it went from 0.4 to 0.2 GDP. So we're very bad in a bad situation. We have a great illegality, illicit cultivation, mining, etc. And we do have opportunities. The Caribbean does have opportunities. Caribbean first. Deuda por acción climática es una posibilidad. Environmental debt swaps. Nosotros hemos
So we've proposed a reduction of the debt in the Caribbean by 12%. In truth, we're speaking about $6 billion. It's not too much to create a Caribbean resilience fund for adaptation. So the Escazú agreement, we're in the same country where the Escazú agreement was signed. It already entered into effect last year at the first COP. And the first COP is in April this year with more metrics for ecosystems. The director of the Statistics Institute of Mexico and Colombia are both here. They've made tremendous headway with regards to ecosystem accounts. And we also need a system to measure and protect nature, protect 80% of forests need to be well protected because remember, they are in the hands of indigenous communities. And nature-based solutions, blue, green, etc., and institutional capacities, these are all issues of great importance because we're facing an urgent need of a change in production and consumption. And we've spoken here about Target 17, institutional goals, implementation means where we stand. Our region is truly a region that's committed with the dear DSG. We are committed, especially with the 2030 agenda and volunteer reports. 17 countries of the region have organizations or agencies, presidential agencies, and 15 have ad hoc mechanisms that follow up the 2030 agenda. And our region has presented 28 voluntary national reports or national reviews. 14 presented them more than one. But this year, we expect Argentina, Dominica, El Salvador, Grenada, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, Suriname, and Uruguay to submit their national reports at a workshop that we hold Wednesday. So our region has advanced tremendously, and this meeting, where the president is calling to us for action, it's an opportunity where we see the confluence of groups of regions: Central America, the Caribbean, Spanish-speaking Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean. I want to thank Rodrigo Mirka, who's the first chair of the forum, and we work together with Mexico as well. Many interest groups who are present today, they're interconnected. Everyone is invited to this meeting. All voices should be heard. The elderly, men, women, the disabled, migrants, the indigenous communities. Everyone is welcome. And it's important to have the importance of data. We need SDG Gateway is available to all of you, and it helps makes monitoring easier. uh, oversight easier, and it shows you what each of us at the UN are doing. And ECLAC stat, it refers to statistics and combines maps with statistics. So data is presented in the actual geospatial uh, geospatially, so we could see where the actual problems lie in each country, and the regional digital agenda, which is also important. Target 17 refers to the fact that we need infrastructure, but we also need an e-government. An example, in Mexico, e-invoices uh, was became 0. Uh, meant that we had a rise of in our GDP by 0.17% just by instating electronic invoices. It More people were being taxed. So this is a mechanism for accountability. So emerging technology, regional markets, we need a regional market that is digitized and political dialogue to harmonize regulations. And thank you, President Cabral, for mentioning this. The development funding agenda, you and Vice Chancellor Solano and Chancellor Solano, sorry, have been defenders, pioneers with regards to this. And we know that this trust can be funded with special drawing funds because the bank can have special rights for uh, for allotting, for signing funds, and being able to broaden the possibility for more loans, expand instruments, reforming the multilateral debt systems, as well as credit rating agencies. We have three private ones. Well, how about if we had a public one, a multilateral credit rating agency? Contingency clauses, new instruments, bonds, or new products. And this has been attained through the UNDP and women's uh, bonds, SDGs, and the Resilience Fund of the Caribbean. So, to end, this document is available for all of you to comment on. Remember, it's a live document. Nothing is written in stone until it is. And we will look at all your comments. Tell us if we left something out. Uh, we have tried our best. And I want to thank Mario Chimoli, who helped me coordinate this magnificent document. He's Raise your hand, please. Mario, you have been instrumental to this task. So many countries always said, how about our common agenda? What is that? Is it competing with the 2030 agenda? No, it's not a competition. What it does, it complements, it fosters, because it draws on certain strategies. It looks at employment, productive capacities, digitalization. The 2030 agenda does too, but our common agenda presented by the Secretary General also refers to the urgency of multilateralism, the urgency of gender equality. And that's why, dear friends, today we are presenting this document today and submitting it for your consideration. Thank you.